I want to, at this point in time, bring Mihir back in, because one of the issues that we look at is also the question of the public broadcaster. And like you pointed out, and we begun with this idea that is it really the responsibility of media to articulate freedom and to be more representative of the diversity of voices? Is it then the responsibility of the state alone to create safe spaces? And what happened to public service broadcasting in India? And is that an option then to look at more diversity of opinion?
I'm not sure that our state has had a great record with public service broadcasting. We started off quite well, and I think those of us who lived through the late 80s remember what Doordarshan had become, and you know where we used to do sort of an imitation of newscasters in school, which began with Aaj Pradhan Mantri, and so I'm not certain. There are many parts of the world where a public service broadcaster or a publicly funded broadcaster has serves as a sort of anchor of sanity for the media. I'm not certain whether it will work here. I mean, I'd also like to take off on what you said about the state creating safe spaces or places for Look, when you're talking about free speech and what the state can do, there are three different sets of things. Or three different questions you should be asking about state activity. The first is the state by itself restricting free speech? The second is the state not enforcing people's rights to free speech? These are two completely different things. And the third is the state somehow restricting the space for private individuals to create other vehicles of speech? So, you know, are there restrictions on new media, etc., that don't directly control what people say, but control the number of ways in which they can say it, for example? We are sort of suffering from a combination of all three. The first thing is that we don't actually have untrammeled free speech in this country. Both constitutionally and thanks to the action of the courts, we have a relatively restricted set of rights in terms of speech. We do not, for example, I mean, our sedition rights are very, very broad. The Constitution in itself includes a prohibition, the possibility that the state can clamp down on speech which is capable of disturbing public order. In India, anything disturbs public order, such as it is. You know, you can start, so therefore, obviously, you leave the state with an enormous amount of power to basically define what could conceivably disturb public order and clamp down on that speech, which is exactly what they have done in various parts of the country. This is in fact where I find, and it's a pity that Shoma has left, but this is where this claim that Shoma made, which is that, you know, the right to offend is very important, is pernicious, wrong, and detestable. All right, you have the right to say something indicating that you are offended. When you phrase something as a right to offense, it means that I can go to some length to defend this right. No, the only length you can go to is to say something that disagrees with me. All right, there is no such thing as a right to offense. Unfortunately, constitutionally, practically, we now do have a right to offense. And it's something that we have to sort of kick back against, which is why we have this sort of standard, you know, sort of view that is shared by many on the center and on the left and on the right, that there's, you know, then there are questions of tolerance involved. You have to respect other people's opinion, other people's belief systems. You have to respect their group identity, etc., etc., etc. Unfortunately, it is precisely that kind of thinking which allows the state the power to define what is and what will not disturb public order. And therefore, you move from the first thing, does the state actually restrict rights, to do they create safe spaces, or do they defend what people have said? And then we come to the truth that no, they don't, right? The first question that anybody will ask in the state, if somebody says something problematic, is, why did you say that? You know that's offensive. All right, we've seen this happen over and over again. Now, on the one hand, the argument that can be said is that typically the people who are doing the offending are more privileged than the people who are taking offense. And this is a very valid point. It usually is because many people who are who take offense in our country do so because they feel that it is an insult to their dignity, and dignity matters more to those who have less, right? Um, Unfortunately, there are limits to how far that argument will go. Because the moment that you say it is a question of dignity, it is a question of group rights, you open it up to, you open this question of speech up to what the state will do to defend it, how the state can use it to clamp down on people they disagree with, and so on and so forth. And the third and final thing is the state acting to create enough spaces where people can say different things? And the state can't do much there. The most that it can do is to not clamp down on noisy things like, for example, the internet, right? Which, I mean, we all agree that there are problems with it, but the most that the state can do is reduce restrictions and hope that something emerges. I'd love it to be the case the state could also say that we have a public broadcaster or a public news service which serves as a bedrock for ethics and includes lots of different views and includes lots of different voices. In effect, we've never had that. Whenever the state starts something, it gets captured by the Central Delhi Mandi House elite, or the various different forms of the Delhi elite, either the JNU elite or the whatever people who are connected. And it doesn't. We can't expect that if the state starts anything, it will in fact be representative. So, I mean, I wouldn't say a public service broadcaster is an answer. I do know what the state needs to do is to say we will enforce your right to say things and be very, very careful about the state's constitutionally mandated ability to clamp down on absolutely anything we say, which it does have.
Thank you, Mayor. What I really wasn't alluding, though, to the DD kind of public service broadcasting, the presence of probably Channel 13 or Channel 4, the presence of an independent media, that really brings us to the last part of the discussion, and Shoma did flag this, the cartoon controversy. And the idea that was it really a certain section of Dalits who were offended, or for the first time you saw great interest in the kind of textbooks that we as a country were reading? For the first time you saw a host of parliamentarians across party lines coming together and taking great umbrage at the fact that the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution had been offended. Students was not actually a collection of cartoons, but had actually contextualized the way the democratic process and the idea of the Constitution had actually been formulated. Kindle, that brings me to you, really. As a society, have we lost our sense of humor? Did we have one to begin with? And this idea of tolerance, I mean, I have great problems with when we use the word tolerance. It's almost like being charitable to the other. I am tolerating you. I don't necessarily agree with you, but if you say something, I would politely sit with you and smile and nod. Where does that take us to the multiplicity of expression, the plurality, and the diversity that this country has always represented?
Yeah. So I'll come to the points that you make, and valid points, them all. What happens today is what I call the branding of protest. जी सवेरे हम गए हौस खास विलेज में, हमने ब्रेकफास्ट खाया एल्मास पे, फिर हम जंतर मंतर गए, in between tucked in a little visit to Mango, फिर हमने वहाँ पे हमारे फ़ोन पे कैंडल लेके हमने कैंडल नहीं लेके because it's the morning, but हमने हमारे दोस्तों के साथ फ़ोटो खिंचवाया, हमने थोड़ी नारेबाजी की, और हमने immediately Facebook पे पोस्ट कर दिया कि we were also there, and that constitutes our politics, really, not just our protest but our politics. And I fear greatly. I run an organization called WIPOL, and we work in using technology really to try and connect citizens with governance. But my big fear has been that A, anybody can protest, B, anybody can protest on anything, everybody's protest is valid. But even more scarily, your protest becomes your politics. It's like a brand that you carry, it's your badge, it's something that you buy off the shelf. It's not something that comes from within you. It's not something, that you naturally feel and you're inclined towards. It comes because you think it's another, it's a consumerist behavior, right? You consume protest. We all consume protest like we consume, Hoska's village. a cafe, right? Or anything for that matter. And this consumption of protest and this consumption of politics is something that I'm very scared of. I believe that really, and social media is, as Anshul says, a very powerful weapon. I wish it would take some form, and I hope it will. It's still very early days, as he points out. I wish it would take some form where politics is to come from within us. It came from who we are, right? It came from where we came from. This entire idea that politics can be something that we consume one day along with breakfast, lunch and dinner and forget the other day is a scary thing to me. And therefore, I believe the idea of protest and idea of politics, if it comes from within us and is an inherent thing that we believe in, is a great and vital thing. And I wish, and India needs that kind of politics. I mean, another thing that was mentioned earlier and I think is really vital, our parents' generation had politics. Nitin Desai is here, Karthik's father. He would bear with me on this. They all had politics, right? They grew up with politics and the idea of who they were as political people. We all grew up today, and we are today, byproducts of, my politics is defined by Fab India. It doesn't come from who I am. It is defined because I buy things from Fab India. This entire, people say vote with your wallet, and it's an interesting idea and sometimes very powerful. But the flip side of vote with your wallet is this, that you can buy into any political ideology. That I find very problematic. And therefore, to take the point that Subi was making, that tolerance comes, where does tolerance come from? Let's ask that question. Are we inherently tolerant because it's fashionable? So anybody can say anything, but because I need to be a liberal, I need to be, cool about it, right? Where does my politics and where does my tolerance come from? And therefore, that's the question that we need to ask. If you're tolerant, ask yourself, why are you tolerant? Is it inherently who you are, or is it because you're ingenue, right? Are you intolerant because who you are? And I'm happy with intolerance. I'm always happy with intolerance, but that intolerance should come from who you are. Not because you live in Nagpur and close to the RSS headquarters. And this entire idea, we have broken up this country, unfortunately, into silos. So everything that the RSS does is bad. Everything that Brinda Karat says is right. And vice versa. So our problems come from there. If we are truly a country which has 28 official languages, then we need to talk more with each other. And I really believe, before I hand it over to Subi and she goes to Anshul, I really hope that we would use technology and the media to speak more to each other and therefore understand where our tolerance, our intolerance, and indeed our politics come from. And none of those come off a shelf where you can pay for.